While the world was distracted by the Middle East, something happened in Washington that had long been expected but also feared. Donald Trump, who had until the end avoided direct confrontation with Moscow, unexpectedly signed a package of tough sanctions against Russia's largest oil companies. According to the Wall Street Journal, this decision came after weeks of pressure from the National Security Council and the CIA, which presented the president with new data on how Russia was financing the war in Ukraine through oil revenues. The sanctions target Rosneft, Lukoil, and Gazprom Neft, the very core of Russia's oil export sector. Bloomberg Economics estimates that Russia's budget losses could reach up to 40% of all export revenues in the coming months. The situation is worsened by the fact that the American sanctions are not limited to restrictions on equipment supplies or dollar transactions. They also extend to foreign partners, creating major risks for China and India. That is why, according to the Financial Times citing sources in the Indian government, major Asian traders have already begun temporarily suspending purchases of Russian oil for fear of being hit by so-called secondary sanctions. This caused a real shock in the energy market. But the main story is now unfolding not in Moscow or Washington, but in New Delhi. According to Reuters, the Indian leadership took Trump's decision as a personal affront. Just last year, Trump publicly called Narendra Modi a true friend of America, but now a deep rift has emerged between them. It began when the White House imposed additional tariffs on Indian goods, including pharmaceuticals and textiles, allegedly to restore trade balance. For Modi, this became the last straw, especially amid U.S. pressure to halt Russian oil purchases. According to the Economic Times, during closed-door talks, the Prime Minister stated that India would not allow anyone to dictate from whom it can buy energy resources, particularly when national security is at stake. Moreover, according to sources in India's Ministry of Energy, New Delhi is preparing a plan to increase Russian oil imports by 25% in the coming months, but with a twist. To avoid provoking an immediate U.S. response, the deals will be processed through intermediaries in Singapore and Dubai, with payments made in yuan and dirhams. This effectively means that India intends, for the first time, to partially abandon dollar-based settlements in the energy sector. China, which also came under pressure from the new U.S. measures, has taken a wait-and-see approach. According to analysts from the South China Morning Post, Beijing does not want to openly challenge Washington before the G20 summit, but is already quietly moving part of its contracts with Russia to offshore jurisdictions to avoid sanctions. Meanwhile, Moscow is taking advantage of the situation by offering Asian partners discounts of up to $30 per barrel and guaranteeing deliveries via alternative routes. The situation has become paradoxical. Trump, in his attempt to strangle Russia, has inadvertently accelerated the formation of a new energy axis linking Moscow, Delhi, and Beijing. The Kremlin understands this perfectly. According to Politico Europe, Russia may soon announce the creation of a joint energy fund with India and China to protect mutual investments from sanctions. Washington has not yet commented, but tension is palpable in the White House. One official, speaking on condition of anonymity, said that if India indeed proceeds with open defiance of the sanctions, relations between the two countries could enter a state of Cold War. According to sources cited by Axios, Trump took Modi's actions as a personal betrayal and demanded that his advisors prepare a package of retaliatory measures, including the possible freezing of military contracts with Indian companies. But the president found himself trapped. India is a key U.S. partner in containing China, and overly harsh measures could only push New Delhi closer to Moscow and Beijing. Meanwhile, Moscow is displaying a show of calm. Pro-government media have been reporting since morning that the Russian economy will withstand any blow, but behind the scenes the Kremlin is anxious. According to the Moscow Times, the Ministry of Finance is preparing an emergency plan in case oil revenues collapse. Options being discussed include sharply increasing taxes, cutting social spending, and switching to yuan-based settlements even within the country. These are only temporary measures, but they reveal that Moscow has for the first time truly felt pressure capable of altering its war strategy. Europe, for its part, has greeted the news with cautious optimism. The European Commission welcomed the U.S. move, calling it an important element of global pressure on Putin's regime, Yet privately, there are concerns that if Russia loses most of its oil revenues, the Kremlin may resort to escalation, including cyber attacks or attempts to destabilize neighboring states. Now, all eyes are on New Delhi. The decision Modi makes in the coming days could be decisive. It will determine whether Russia becomes isolated or gains a second chance to survive. Washington awaits an official response. Moscow prepares for talks, and the markets are frozen in anticipation. There is a sense that something major is coming, and as The Guardian writes, for the first time in a long while it seems that India, not the United States or China, has become the key player upon whom the planet's energy future depends. However, as tensions rise, the situation is beginning to take on unexpected geopolitical dimensions. According to Reuters, Trump personally instructed the State Department to draft a new sanctions package aimed not only at Russia, but also at any companies involved in the re-export of Russian oil through third countries. This means that dozens of Indian, Chinese, and even Arab intermediaries supplying gray market crude could come under fire. Moreover, the U.S. administration is actively discussing the idea of creating a special international mechanism for tracking Russian tankers using satellite monitoring and artificial intelligence. One White House advisor told Politico that Trump is ready to show that the era of half measures is over and that America now intends to dismantle all sanctions-evading schemes. The Kremlin has reacted extremely painfully. Russian officials call Washington's actions energy terrorism and claim that the U.S. is trying to break the global economy to preserve the dollar's dominance. According to TASS, Russia's Ministry of Energy has already held an emergency meeting with oil company executives to discuss measures for protecting export routes, including the possibility of redirecting some shipments through Iran and North Korea. Experts from Nikkei Asia note that the latter option could be extremely risky, as using North Korea would automatically lead to even harsher international isolation. Meanwhile, India continues to play its delicate game. According to India Today, the government is quietly discussing the idea of creating a special oil zone outside sanctions, which would include companies purchasing Russian crude through domestic settlements that bypass dollar clearing systems. This step would in effect challenge the entire US-built financial architecture. In New Delhi, talk of a sovereign right to energy security is becoming more frequent. Modi himself, speaking at a closed meeting with party members, reportedly said, "We will not allow India to become a pawn in someone else's game. If America thinks it can dictate where we buy oil, it is mistaken." While officials in Washington are trying to prevent panic, analysts warn that this crisis could prove far more dangerous than previous trade wars. It has the potential to reshape not only the structure of global trade, but also the system of political alliances. And in this new world, Modi and Putin may unexpectedly find themselves on the same side of the barricades, while Trump faces isolation of his own making.